Hi, I'm Sister Simone Campbell. I'm the Executive Director of Network, Lobby for Catholic Social Justice, and I have the honor of being the leader of Nuns on the Bus. And today we are in Kansas City visiting the Migrant Farmworkers Assistance Fund. On our bus trip, we've been doing bridging divides between urban and rural. We've been at a variety of locations, but this time we get to talk with a group who are working with the actual farm workers, and I'm sure we're going to learn a lot. So let's bring on our guests. Great, welcome. I'm so glad to have this opportunity to chat with you all. And maybe, Suzanne, we could start with you and just go around and everybody introduce themselves and we could get a feel for who you are and what your role is.
Great, thanks, Mom. I'm Suzanne Gladney. I'm the founder and director. I'm an immigration lawyer, director of the Migrant Farmworkers. I set this program up in 1984 inside legal aid. We serve a group of migrant and seasonal farm workers, migrants who come in for a short period of time for the apple and peach harvest, and year-round families that work on the orchards year-round. There's about 60 families, 300 people more or less that are year-round. And then the migrants are here right now. We're just finishing up the apple crop right now. So we have a really holistic program that does a lot of different services for people. And we're in the middle of it, or kind of at the end, but we've been in the middle of it for months here.
So how many migrant workers would you estimate come for the harvest?
It's a little hard to estimate them totally. I'd say this year, maybe there's around 150, something like that. They're spread out over about 55 miles.
Wow.
And sometimes this year, there's been just a lot of coming and going. So we've had a group here for 3 or 4 weeks, and then that group leaves and another group comes, which is not typical. So maybe there's even been as many as 200 this year, just because there's been so much coming and going rather than people coming in the end of October, which is the usual situation.
Okay, thanks, Suzanne. Elizabeth, yeah, could you introduce
I'm Elizabeth. I am the program director here at the Migrant Farmworkers Assistance Fund. So I work really closely with Suzanne to kind of coordinate all the different social service programs that we offer. So we do a lot of healthcare, case management, and interpretation, as well as educational support and involvement and engagement with youth. So we kind of work with family systems as well as individuals here during the migrant season, also those who have settled in the county that we serve in rural Missouri year-round. So we also do kind of like emergency assistance programs like food and clothing and basic items, as well as in our like less busy season, some more kind of like educational and social programming for like a women's group for people who are not working full time, and some adult education programs in the evening as well to educate issues that are important to them.
That's a lot. Okay, and Sue, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah. My name is Sue Robb, and I'm the Pastoral Associate for Justice and Life at St. Francis Xavier Catholic Church in Kansas City. It's a Jesuit parish. And I've been in this job about 2 years, and I learned about the Migrant Farmworkers Assistance Fund, and we wanted to partner with them. So what we do is they have needs of beans and rice. So we collect beans and rice pretty much year round, baseball caps, anything they really need. And then we also take a group out once or twice a year to volunteer and put together food bags and in whatever form they need, help. We're happy to serve and to help. So I just love being on the coattails of this project. So.
Wow, and what a great gift to your parish also to be able to be that bridge. How wonderful. That's great. Wonderful. Okay, now I understand we have a video that we can see to talk about some of the migration patterns, because one of the things that I think is really kind of unique about this site visit, that it's dealing both with folks who move with the harvest or with the crop rotation, as well as folks who are, stay in your area. So let's watch that, and then we'll get a better feel for the environment that we're talking about.
We have a worker and family in the fall for the apple and peach season. Usually at that point, they go either to Florida or Texas to get themselves established where they're going to be for citrus. They may go back to Mexico in the very cold weather or around Christmas. Especially if they have kids in school, they probably won't stay for very long in Mexico, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and then come back and then start a northward progression, usually to Georgia to do onions. Some of them will split into different locations, and those folks, those workers and families will probably be in 3 to 4 different locations in the United States. It's a circuit of several different locations, and so it's not that they know exactly where they're going to go.
I was coming and going and coming and going. I came here, but before I went to Carolina, to Florida, to California. We came from the other places, and here's where we work, picking fruit.
Y de aquí pues ya se recoge uno. Mi sobrina iba a nacer.
I came because my niece was going to be born. My brother was here. He was working on the roads and trimming trees.
Y cortando árboles. Sí.
I was 13 and I was here with my mom.
Con mi mamá.
I was almost 8 months pregnant and I was scared because I have just moved and about to deliver my baby. It's difficult when you come over, when you don't know people and when you don't have anything, because I have gone through a time when I didn't have anything.
Wow. Okay. So, excuse me, talk to me about what does it mean to be migrants? What does it mean to be stable in the community? I mean, I had no idea about how big that migration movement is. How is, I mean, are folks contracted? Do they move in groups? How does this work? Tell us.
They are the orchard owners. This area in Lafayette County, where they are here, when they're here in Missouri, has a lot of different orchards. But there's only 3 of them that are large enough that they have labor camp housing on their property, and they have actual migrants that come. The orchard owners make contracts or make agreements with crew leaders. They don't put all their eggs in one basket. If that crew leader, falls off a truck or something, then they wouldn't have any workers. So they have several different crew leaders that they work with. And generally around the end of April, that's kind of the defining time in Missouri for how the crop is going to be. They then contact the crew leaders and say, okay, I need you to bring 30. I need you to bring 50. I need you to bring this many that are pickers, this many that are people that can work in the packing sheds, which is essentially like a fruit factory where they're washing and sorting, putting them in baskets or boxes or bags. So it's a crew leader system. The crew leaders typically have crews that do certain kinds of things. So these people are fruit pickers. That's typically what they do almost everywhere they go. They may do corn detasseling in Indiana and Illinois, but they're typically fruit pickers. They're people who are able to be up on ladders, able to do that kind of work. They're typically not people that are stooping over picking tomatoes or strawberries or something that's low to the ground. So they travel in groups. The crew leader puts together a transportation plan for them. Some of them have vehicles, some of them don't. Some of them have a van, so he'll crowd, a lot of people in there. They're very limited in what they're allowed to bring. There also is a temporary farm worker labor visa program. One of the orchards started that program 5 years ago, started using that program. It's a pretty expensive program, requires a recruiter to go to Mexico and find workers, get them processed with passports and their visas and everything and bring them. They bring them on school buses. And so those workers are just pickers. They're all single men, at least when they're here, and most of them have families back in Mexico. This year there were about 60 or so of those workers in two different places, two different camps. So those workers are ones that don't have transportation once they get here, and they're in very isolated camp locations. So we end up going out to serve those. We take food bags out, we take clothing out, we take hygiene kits out. We are going out to those camps. I'll let Elizabeth talk a little bit more about just sort of the workers and families.
Sure. I mean, as Suzanne was mentioning, it's a very word of mouth system, I would say. Like Sister Simone, you were asking a little bit about the difference between migratory families and workers versus people who work seasonally or people who live here year round. So we kind of have a variety of categories of sort of what people's situations are. What Suzanne was describing was mostly people who are coming just for the migrant season. So they come sometime in early mid-August, and right around now they're leaving because the apple harvest has ended. Some people come earlier because one of the orchards in the area also has like a big peach harvest. So people might come in June and work the peaches and then transfer over to one of the other orchards that has an apple season. So, but many of the people that we serve who live here year round were once migrants. And so, but then for different reasons, they decided to stay. Maybe it was difficult for their kids to switch school districts several times a year, or maybe there was a complicated health issue in the family that it was, just a lot easier to be in one space and kind of be established in one medical home rather than trying to get care that they need and kind of re-explain a situation many different times as they travel through different areas. So, but I think just kind of getting to know the families that we work with, we hear a lot of different ways that people end up doing the jobs that they're doing, or kind of having the situation that they have, like, oh, I lived in Florida and my cousin knew this person who was working up here, so I came, and now 20 years later, like, I still work here, and like, this is the type of work that my family does, and we've been proud of the type of work that we've been able to do, kind of being settled here for so long. So so there are, I guess, to kind of differentiate, between year round and seasonal. So there are some people who are employed all year by the orchards because there are a lot of maintenance tasks with the trees that have to be done even in the times where people aren't picking apples. So there's a lot of pruning and taking down old trees and planting new ones, and kind of doing maintenance to the labor camp areas where people live as well. So there are a small number of people who work year round there, and then others who live here year round, but they only work during the apple season. They might work in another kind of agricultural related field, like a meat packing plant, or they have a lot of hog farms in the area as well. So they might do something that's kind of more animal related in other parts of the year, but then work with the orchards during the apple season because there's so much work to be done during that time.
Wow. It's way more complex than I ever thought. Mm-hmm. I'm such a city person. I don't know any of this.
So, one of the things that I think Francisca in the red sweater was saying is that often usually it's not their choice where they're going. It's the crew leaders putting together a crew for a certain location based on the numbers that are needed, how many, whether it's a location that has family housing, whether it's a location that only has single people. And so, I think she said something like, and you don't know where you're going. Yeah. Often the case. Often, even when they're on the way, they may not know exactly where they're going. One of the things that I remember early in my career with this is I don't think I had met an adult before who didn't know where they were. So one of the first things that we do when we go out to meet them when they first arrive is we have maps of the United States. We have a map of Missouri. We have Mexico included on it, or El Salvador, Honduras, we have some other nationalities besides folks with Mexican heritage. But just to be sure that they know where they are. Because many times they've been on a bus for a very long time, especially the ones coming from Mexico. They've been on a bus for 2 days, and they have no idea where they are. So it's
Wow.
it's a really interesting. It's interesting just to meet them at first and sort of get to know them and talk to them and just welcome them. Just be friendly and welcoming.
Yes. I mean, I hadn't thought about that you just volunteer for a job and you don't know where it's going to be. That are these contractors, the crew leaders, are they for the most part trustworthy? Because we've read some of our work in legislation is about how some of these contractors exploit the workers. What's your experience?
There are definitely horror stories. We haven't seen that.
Oh,
sometimes we hear about people. We have people who come who have been mistreated in another location and have joined up with this crew leader. We haven't ever had any wage claims from people who are here about the orchards here. I think one of the reasons that I've seen is the orchards are very small family-owned orchards, and the family members are right there and have been for generations working with these same crew leaders or these crew leaders' fathers. And a lot of the crew leaders also have crews of people that have worked for them for a long time. And someone will say, oh, I heard about this crew leader and I tried to get onto his crew and now I'm with him and everything's fine. But there are definitely horror stories that you hear pretty frequently about people in other places.
Right. And can you talk at all about how how much they're paid? What is a wage for doing this work?
So it varies a little bit, I think, between what type of job you're doing, because picking apples pays differently than when you're working like in the packing shed and kind of doing like the polishing and cleaning of apples. And it's pretty generally kind of separated by gender. I mean, there's a lot of exceptions to that, but like a lot more women work in the packing sheds and that's an hourly rate. And a lot more men are out in the trees doing the picking. Although, obviously we have experiences with people doing the opposite job as well. So, and when Suzanne was describing like the H-2A workers, the temporary guest worker program, those people are paid usually a different rate than people who come here by another means or through other crew leaders. And what we've heard is that there's kind of different ways of doing that. Sometimes it's like piecemeal pay, so they're paid by the number of apples that they're picking. And so I think on days where it's rainy or they get up and they're going to do, 10 hours of picking, but then it's so hot that, they really can't be out there that long, or the weather changes, people's pay is really affected by that. And so I think one of the things that we've seen a lot is just because agricultural jobs are so weather dependent, there's not a lot of control that people have over the amount of work that they're able to do sometimes, or the amount of money that they're able to earn. And I think that can be really difficult, especially for people who are trying to send money back to Mexico or just support their families here, is the general kind of unpredictability of the types of jobs. But I think from what I've heard with the packing shed jobs, people who are working those, I think it's somewhere in between $9 and $10 an hour. And I can't remember off the top of my head what the pickers are making, but I think it translates maybe roughly, I mean, again, depending on the day and the weather, but probably somewhere around like that $12 to $14 per hour.
Wow. Okay.
We, because of the different public benefits that folks may be eligible for, or their children may be eligible for, we see a lot of income tax returns and different paycheck stubs and things. All of them remain very well below the federal poverty level because whatever they're doing here is not necessarily what they'll be doing next at the same pay rate. And there usually is a gap of time where they're not working at all. The orchard owners here, for example, will give a date by which people have to be here, but there may not be work yet. They just need to know for sure that they've got 30 people here that are ready to work, because if they don't, then they have to get some more here right away.
Oh, my glory.
Perishable crops. So there are also families that want to be here right when school is ready to start, even though the work may not be quite ready to start. So there generally is a gap and a travel time when they're traveling to a location, traveling from to another location, where there may be no income at all, probably no income at all. So those things just meld together to make this a very hardworking population of people, but that are very low income.
Oh my gosh, yes. And I mean, so many things that I had never thought of, the complexity of school and making sure that your kids are in school. So let me make sure that I'm getting this right. So some of your migrant folks then come so that their kids can get into the school while they're here?
The kids are in school. Our organization is, we have a lot of education support. The orchards here that we're working with are spread out over 3 different school districts. So we're working with 3 very small, very rural, don't have enough money for people who are here all year round school districts. And then they're serving a population of people that, especially the migratory students, are always behind. They move so often, and different states have different requirements, and so they've missed fractions, or they weren't in Michigan when they teach it in 5th grade or something, or when they teach it in 4th grade, and they just are like, I just never got it. So the kids often are in as many as 3 to 4 school districts a year. So a lot of the families that have come here over and over again want to be here when school first starts here, because they know that we'll help them get the bus routes set up, we'll help them get the kids enrolled, we'll help get the records from their private last schools, and get all that put together so that they're ready to start school on time. We also are very involved with the Migrant Head Start program that's here, that provides care for tots from 6 weeks old up to kindergarten. And so that's a program that is really important for people with young children, because in rural America, there's very little childcare for little kids. There's not big daycare centers or something in these tiny little towns.
Wow.
So having that is also really important for families.
Well, I'm curious because, there's this big national conversation about opening schools up with COVID and all this. Has COVID impacted you all this year?
Definitely. I mean, the school districts that we work with are, as Suzanne was mentioning, very small. So I think in some ways that is a benefit in terms of the schools being able to organize kind of a response to doing school safely in person when, there's not that many kids in the district in the first place. All 3 of the districts that we work with have kids going in person right now. 2 of them have a virtual option that a few people have elected into. But I think we're working with people in rural Missouri, and so the precautions that are being recommended versus required kind of vary. And so not all kids are required to wear a mask at school right now. And so I know that has, impacted families' sense of safety and control over kind of wanting their kids to be in person and getting the best learning experience that they can, but then also worried about kind of what do the rules, or sometimes lack of rules, mean for the safety of the rest of the family. And so we did see with this year, one school district pushed back their start into about the middle of September, just to kind of come up with more of a comprehensive plan. And I think that was helpful to give people more time, especially folks who are migrants, to get here and get enrolled at the same time that everyone else was, because sometimes families are coming to, just based on when the work is going to start, and maybe the back to school event was the week before. And so then it kind of takes a little bit of time to get caught up. the school districts in Texas also open a lot later. So sometimes even requesting records, people aren't in the school buildings down there. So you can't get a response from them right away to even get the records to get started here. So I think in some ways that one school district kind of starting later helped the migrant kids in that district kind of start off on the same timeline as everyone else. But I think the other thing that we've kind of noticed with the pandemic this year is just because kids were previously enrolled in a district in Texas that had to move to an online status when the pandemic started, it was kind of a big question that people had to figure out, like, am I just going to keep my kid enrolled in this district in Texas?
Hi.
Or
Sorry, was the
are,
Nuns on the Bus event?
Yeah, right here.
or are we gonna, like, you know, take them out of this program that they were doing online and go in person here, even though they're only going to be here for a couple of months?
Oh, wow. How complicated. So oh man, that is a challenge. And then do the schools involve the parents too? I mean, do you have like parent-teacher opportunities and engage the parents as well in the education of their kids, or how is that working?
Actually, next week, we're having parent-teacher conferences in one of the districts, and we will be accompanying parents to interpret. Only one of the 3 school districts has any Spanish-speaking staff at all on their staff, because these are tiny, tiny, tiny districts. One of the districts, all grades, K through 13 to 12, are in one building. So, I mean, these are tiny, tiny little districts. And I mean, they're really struggling to serve on a per student formula. They're struggling to serve the kids who are here all year round, much less these kids that come in that are very far behind. So we have parent-teacher conferences scheduled next week, and we'll be with the parents interpreting for the parent-teacher conference and trying to making sure they know how to get records before they leave, so that they have records in hand to wherever they're going next. So that's one of the things that we're involved in.
Wow. So maybe could you, because I mean, you're in Kansas City itself, and so I'm guessing more of your parishioners are like me, a city person. So I'm curious, as you are collecting things for the Farmworkers Assistance Fund, as you're engaged, are you finding that your people are learning about rural America as well? And what kinds of things are you finding that are new for you?
Most definitely. We are in kind of an inner city parish with our own unique set of circumstances where we are, and then to go out into the rural community to see the people. We don't go to the camps per se, but we are, at this Head Start program where they come on Monday evenings and pick up their food bags and other supplies that they need. So yeah, we've gotten a real sense of, I think, the migratory process and just the awe of people just being here for a few months and then moving and not having, that foundation, and moving with what they have on their backs, basically. So that has just been a real eye-opening insight just into how difficult the lives are. So we do collect. People are constantly saying,
Exactly.
what else do they need? What else do they need? It's like, send money. So what we have done, collecting the things that we do collect, beans and rice and the ball caps, socks, those basic necessities. I think it takes us who are city people out of what we think we need versus what sustains people and what
Right.
other people really.
I know
need.
I often buy my vegetables at a farmer's market, and just even learning just a teeny bit from talking to the folks that, staff the market, it's just such an eye opener, because I don't know anything about this. So how important to bridge those divides. That seems to me like a double service. And I wonder about I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So what kind of housing do the migrant families have? And then what kind of housing do the permanent families, are they able to find in your area? I don't know if Suzanne or Elizabeth, if you want to talk to that, or anybody, it's open. Okay, we have to unmute, right? There we go.
One of the things about the camps is that they're all kind of different, but essentially it's a concrete box, a set of 5 or 6 concrete boxes that are together, and they have a door in the front with a window. That's the one window. And then the back opens into usually a joint bathroom system. So if there are 6 units, there may be 3 bathrooms in the back. Kind of if you're in a camp that has single men, you'll have 4 to 6 guys in one of these concrete units. And then there'll be 4 or 5 of those units together. So that's kind of the model. One of the things that Sue mentioned about clothing, I mean, they're arriving here end of July, first part of August, when it can be, 90 to 100 degrees here in Missouri. And then they're still here now, and it's 40 degrees and frost. So we're looking at people who come with summer clothing, and they're very limited in what they're allowed to bring. But then Sue's parish and other parishes, other churches, other groups are bringing us sweatshirts and sweaters and blankets that we've been giving out the last few weeks because it's cold. A lot of these units are not heated because they really don't need to be heated in July, August, and September, but then come October they do. And so it's I'll let Elizabeth talk a little bit about the year-rounders and kind of what their housing situations are.
Sure. Yeah. So the orchards that we work with, I think, are unique in comparison to some other parts of Missouri, like in Southeast Missouri, where there are also a lot of migrants, and that the orchards here provide housing for free. So kind of what Suzanne was describing is not, people don't have to pay for living here. And so that is for both people who are here as migrants and then also for people who work for the orchards year round. And so there are some like houses and then also some trailers in the various towns that are close to these orchards that are housing for the families. There are other people who, after they've been here for a while, or maybe they've moved to another type of agricultural work or kind of like meat packing, like I mentioned, who rent or sometimes buy houses in the rural areas where they're living. But it's kind of a variety, and from like an actual house to an apartment or trailer to some of this kind of like dorm style housing, which Suzanne was describing. And we were kind of wondering about how this would work with the pandemic and just like social distancing this year, especially with.
Yeah, that was my thought. It was like, yikes. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Especially with bringing workers here, like from another country. And so we were kind of asking people when we went out to the camps earlier in the season, sort of like, what was that process like? Some of them have come here, for the last 4 or 5 years on these temporary visas. And they said, well, like the process took a lot longer, but it didn't really have much to do with actually like being screened for symptoms or like getting a test done. I think it was just a lot more processing because of the situation with the border right now. And so typically where there would be like 2 bunk beds and 4 men living in a unit, I think their like kind of social distancing plan was that there were 3 men in each one. I think there was 1 room in each dorm that was designated as sort of like the quarantine room if needed. But we were actually, we were very relieved and impressed. We took some healthcare providers from one of the local F2HC clinic systems with us to outreach, and they have been doing a lot of the COVID testing for the county. So they brought COVID tests along, and about half of the men at each of the camps that we visited elected to do a test, and no one tested positive. So I think given how close everyone has been living and working in these situations, we were very lucky to know that people were healthy and were not exposed during their travels here or during the time, that they were living together early in the season when we came out and did those health screens.
Wow, that's amazing. That's fantastic. Mm-hmm. Thank heavens. I know we have short little videos, a little bit about healthcare, and maybe we could talk a little bit more about how that impacts you all if our tech wizards in the back end of StreamYard might be able to bring up our healthcare video.
If I go to the doctor, I have to tell the boss. I have to tell the person in charge a day ahead and the time.
Es un poco difícil porque la producción.
It's a bit difficult because production is every day the same. So the only thing I ask them is to make the appointment late so they can be with me at work and then go see the doctor.
Conmigo en el trabajo.
Oh, okay. So medical stuff sounds a little complicated because it would interrupt their capacity to earn, right?
Yes.
To do what needs doing.
So what we've been able to do over the years is, one, get a healthcare system set up. We were able to, it took 2 years, but we were able to get an FQHC clinic.
Okay, for everybody out there.
Federally qualified healthcare facility.
FQHC, that's what it is.
Right. We were able to get one of those established in Lafayette County, which doesn't only serve migrants, but serves everybody, which is a really good thing. And we were able to get that established. Because we were part of the process of getting it established, they really helped us a lot by setting up evening clinics during the migrant season that are only for migrant workers, not for the year-round people, but for the people who are only migratory. So for this season that we're in right now, we've had 5 of those going from 5:30 until 7:30 or 8 in the evening. And we had 1 Saturday clinic. And that's been typical that we've had evening clinics as well as Saturday clinics. We've also had some optometry, special optometry clinics. We have, especially the fruit tree pickers are especially have different eye situations because they're looking up into the sun all day, every day, and they're with a lot of branches and possible injuries to their eyes. So we've had this optometry program now for about 10 years where we have 3 mornings of optometry appointments with 10 appointments at each one. So we have 30 appointments designated just for eye exams. So healthcare is a big part of what we do. We do intensive case management. Most of the clinic systems don't have Spanish speakers. And so we're all Spanish speakers, and we also have some volunteer interpreters that help us with healthcare issues. And so last year we did almost 600 medical and dental appointments throughout the year. And a lot of those are during the migrant season. We also are very involved in picking up medications, delivering lab results, setting up the follow-up care, a lot of different healthcare issues.
Whoa, that's pretty amazing. I mean, what it's sounding more and more like is you're the extended familia. You're the extended family for these migrant workers because, I mean, those are the kinds of services that family provide. So when you don't have it, here you all are. I bet you developed some close relationships with some of the families.
Yeah.
Is that true, Elizabeth? And is it hard to see them move on? That would be hard for me.
It is, but I think the thing that is so great is that so many people come back from year to year. I mean, every year we have migrant families or individuals who are here for the first time, but we also have a really high return rate. So people who, have been coming here for 10 years, or some of them have known, Suzanne for 30 years. And so they have very long-standing relationships with the other people who come, and then also with the people who have worked with this project. And so I think that's another thing that I really enjoyed about our model is because we are such a small staff and because we're working with, a relatively small community as well, we have the ability to be very flexible in what our programming looks like and how it needs to differ from year to year based on what the needs are. So obviously COVID has brought added flexibility and creativity to everyone's lives, but especially in the way that we've done our services. So typically during this season, we have like a Monday night distribution event, which is what Sue was mentioning that she and her parish have been really involved in, where people come to the parking lot and they get food bags and they kind of look through clothing and things like that. We had to transition all that to a drive-through this year. So it's been kind of it's been a little bit, I mean, it's gone very well, actually. I think what we've noticed is that there's less time to kind of get to know people and socialize with them in those ways of kind of connecting about what their needs are, maybe just kind of what they've been up to for the last, 9 months since we saw them last. But overall, I think it's worked very well to kind of to have a different way of doing things and still be able to provide a lot of the same services that people need and still be able to connect with people and let them know that we're here and we're showing up and wanting to be present in the ways that we can that are, safest for them and for us at this time. So.
Absolutely. Sue, I'm curious, do some of your parishioners and do you get a chance to connect with some of the farm workers in that same way, or some of their families?
Most of us do not speak Spanish, so that makes
what a pity.
Yes. So that has been a barrier for us. But what we do is just to go and support Suzanne and her team in whatever way we can. So we had one person who could converse, and when we were outside, she was able to interact a little bit. But most of us are pretty monolingual. Exactly. But it is just, for me, it's just the relationships. It's the relationship that our parish has with Migrant Farmworkers Assistance Fund. It's the relationships that Suzanne and her team develop with the migrants. The trust is huge. And I just really value that.
Well, I'm a couple of things. I'm really struck as you say that Pope Francis's new encyclical is all about encounter and going out of ourselves to meet the other. And he advocates a politics of encounter. Now, wouldn't that be radical if we just went out and met each other and made that our politics? But I'm wondering, how has that kind of encounter, has it impacted your parish, do you think? Or certainly for you that have been doing this work, it must have. But do you think it trickles down to the parish?
One of the other things we do as a parish is we do go down to the border with the Encuentro Project and Rafael Garcia, who used to be our pastor at St. Francis. So we've taken groups down to the border, and Father Rafael is great about reminding us, we have our own borders here in Kansas City, and come back and work within, take that experience and bring it back home. So that is one of the ways that we have kind of connected with the local community and the migrants, and like I say, just finding a way to serve is our goal and our mission.
Isn't that fabulous? A way to serve. Okay, everybody listening, maybe we should ask ourselves the question, what is our way to serve? Good witness, Sue. Good witness. Thank you. But one thing pops in my head as I was saying that. I understand, Suzanne and Elizabeth, your office is in town, is in Kansas City. Is that right? And your office isn't out.
That's right. Our office is in Midtown Kansas City. We're about 50 miles from the kind of the warehouse operation at the Head Start Center where we operate out of. We have staff that are out there almost every day. And we put a lot of miles on 4 vehicles that we own.
Yes.
But it's we've been here the whole time in Kansas City, and I think getting the support, the small communities just really struggle. There really are hardly any social services programs that are out there. Catholic Charities is here in Kansas City. I mean, everything is really here in the reaching to that community.
So for your collaboration and for your resourcing and making other things happen, those qualities of relationships in town then can leverage what you do out at the site. Is that right? That's the idea?
We do try really hard to get local churches involved with us and volunteering with us. That again, there are few churches out there. I mean, these are tiny, several hundred people communities. For example, Waverly is the town that is closest to the largest orchards, and Waverly doesn't have any paved streets except the highway. So it's just a tiny, tiny little town. They only have an elementary school. The kids go from after elementary school, they go to a combined high school, middle school that is about 12 miles away. So these are very, very small towns with very small churches, if there is a church, and very small communities of people. But I do think it's good to have, if possible, to have some local people that come and see. Many people who come from the local area and come to help us on Monday nights will say, golly, I never see them anywhere. And that's because they often are living way down inside the orchards. These labor camps they're not what the orchard owners want people to see. I mean, they're not the beautiful apples in baskets and that are at the market. It's a labor camp. And so they're way down off the road, miles off the road, so that a lot of people in the area don't ever see people. There's no community places. There's no large grocery store. There's no big supermarket. There's no clothing store. I mean, there just aren't stores like that. So they just don't ever see people.
Well, that's really interesting because, we did this series of rural roundtables around the country last year. And in many of them, the first time it happened was up in Minnesota and Wabasha. And at the end, after the program was over, we talked about all kinds of things, farming and the town, and a lot of what you're talking about, small community challenges of getting resources, all that. And then after it was over, somebody said to me, well, we do have the migrants, but we never see them. And I didn't understand why. So I hear you saying it's because they're where they live is so far in the center of where they're picking or where they're doing their migrant work that there's not a possibility of entering in. But it must happen with the school. Those who bring their family, they must interact to some extent.
The kids come to school on buses and often can't stay after for any after school program because the bus just takes kids home. If you want to stay after for something, your parents need to provide transportation. A lot of the older kids are required to be home because there are younger kids in the camp that can't be there alone. So they provide childcare because their moms are working at the packing shed until 6 or 6:30. And so they may be getting dinner ready too. So a lot of the kids don't participate in many things at school other than just getting there on the bus and going home. Many of the migrant kids aren't involved in any kind of sports at school. So it's hard for them to be a part of the community. The migrant kids often are the outsiders at their school. I mean, they're not well known. Some of them are if they come every year, but if they're just here, we actually got a call last night about a young kid that has just showed up at school yesterday from El Salvador. Doesn't speak English, and so we're going to be trying to kind of help that district help them incorporate him today.
Yeah.
Wow.
To kind of add on what you, Sister Simone, have said, and then also what Suzanne was elaborating on, I think that kind of the visibility issues are somewhat geographical. Like Suzanne was saying, like the areas where people live are really removed. They're kind of in between towns or like in the fields where people are working. But then I think also just because of systems barriers, a lot of the places where we, access healthcare or go to school or do other types of things are more difficult for people who are here temporarily or people who are not familiar with the landscape of the place that they are living to access. We have less, I think, opportunities to encounter and meet other people. And I think one of the really interesting things for me when I started working in this job is that I grew up in a town on the other side of Missouri that is also a really big area for apple picking and migrants. And I knew that they were there, but I never knew any of them myself. I mean, I grew up going to Catholic school, so I didn't have like the public education experience where people would have been coming in for a few months. But I think as I was starting in this job several years ago and realizing this is very similar actually to the place I grew up, only I didn't know that any of this was going on. And so I think just recognizing kind of how, even in small communities, how sheltered people's understanding of who is there can be is a really big kind of barrier just mentally for us to break through in terms of learning how we can reach out and have encounters with other people that kind of change the way we think about things.
And I think one of the last things is the language barrier is huge. I think all of us would be the same if we were to go to Serbia tomorrow. We're probably not going to walk into a store because we don't know anybody. I mean, we don't know how to say anything. You don't want to be embarrassed. You don't know how things work here. And so they usually don't go a lot of places. Many of the adults, they speak enough English to know which row of trees is theirs for today, or I mean, they can speak enough of the English just for what they need for work, but to have a conversation is very, very difficult for them, and they're very afraid that they're going to say something that's wrong or a bad word, or that someone's not going to understand them. So they're very hesitant to do that. They usually will ask us to go with them or to make this call for them or do something like that because they're afraid of that.
Oh, wow. I totally understand that because I share that apprehension sometimes in Spanish. I speak Spanish, but it's not perfect. And when I'm feeling frightened or nervous, my Spanish just disappears and I just smile. So I totally understand that. Wow. What a challenge. What a challenge. Well, we're getting, I can't believe this, the hour is almost past. And I feel like there's so much more to ask. One of the things that was striking me as we were talking is it came back to me when I was in junior high. I was probably 6th or 7th grade. I read a book called Alicia, and it was about a young girl, a teenager, whose families were migrants in California. And I lived in California, and this book was so formative for me that I think this piece about encounter and seeing the reality that we can also often miss is so critical. And I guess, Sue, I wanted to ask you, are there ways within your parish that you're able to talk about the experience, to share it, to help people open their eyes to, I mean, this is eye-opening for me. So do you get to do this with your people in Kansas City?
We do. What we did was we put together a PowerPoint after, and we came back and showed it to the parish. So that's one of the ways we do it. We talk it up. I mean, I talk it up anywhere I go about how wonderful the Migrant Farmworker Project is and the things that people can do. I think for me, it's just realizing where my food comes from and the sacrifices that people are making and the hard work that they are doing. So I can go take an apple and go pick through the apples. Just like I say, that disconnect is becoming more connected for me. And so I'm connecting my, ease of life to the work that people are putting in. And so that awareness, and is just huge. And I think we continue to communicate that to our parishioners, and to the communities that we serve.
Yeah. Wow.
So.
If you had a piece of advice for folks watching across the country, us city folk, what would it be, Sue? What would your advice be?
I think, be aware of how everything, all of our policies are focused on making money at the expense of other people, and so looking at those policies, $15 an hour, raising the minimum wage to something that is even barely livable. But look at the policies and see what you can do within your own communities to make for fair and just wages, for better living conditions, for healthcare, for all of those, education, all of those things that affect the poorest among us, and do something about it. Do as much as possible about it to
Do
because you will. Yeah.
Oh, that's fabulous. And so listeners, okay, find your place. You can do this. Everybody has a part to play. I'm certain of this. And we are almost, I can't believe this, gone so fast this time. And I still have so many questions. But Elizabeth, could you talk a little bit about maybe give us an example of a family that has captured your heart and who you look forward to seeing when they come back? As you were talking about that return, I was thinking, tell me a story. Could
Sure.
you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I think that there are a number of people that live in the Rio Grande Valley, kind of close to the border between Texas and Mexico, who have been coming for many years. And the segments of the video that was shown earlier is part of a research project that we've been involved in with some farm workers who have kind of helped give voice to what the needs of their community are. And actually, right as the pandemic was starting, we were able to travel to Texas with the researcher and kind of meet with some of those same people who migrate to Missouri but then live there the rest of the year. And they were helping kind of get this project off the ground in that area too. So
Wow.
families that we have gotten to know really well when they come here, it was a really, it was an experience I was very grateful for, to kind of see the other places where they live and get to know them and their environments down there as well. So I know that's not really specific to a family, but I think a special part of this project that we've been involved in, and also just learning more about what the migratory experience is like, because, you know, we know these people very well. We do a lot of things with them while they're here, but we only know them in this one space and we don't see them in the other parts of their lives. And so I think getting to know kind of the environment where they come from and understand the reality of kind of what makes people leave those areas to come here and seek temporary work as well was a big step for kind of my own understanding of what the issues are that we need to be paying attention to.
That's fabulous. Thank you. And Suzanne, we give you the last word in a minute because we want to watch this little video clip at the end. So
I think in terms of people, Eugenio, who was the first speaker, is someone I've known for 30 years. And he's a very typical migrant and someone we look forward to seeing. His son also comes with him usually. And it's an interesting factor that their permanent address is our post office box. That's another thing about migrants is, and you know, they're legally here. They have tax returns. They have other things that they need to get mail for, and they don't. So we're there. I mean, I heard on the phone while we're sitting here that he called from Mexico. He's in Mexico right now. He called to see if we got this or that, which we did. We got something yesterday for him. So just we're sort of like the post office box for people. We're lots of different things.
wow. What a treat. Well, thank you for giving us a window on a world I knew nothing about. I will reverence the fruit in the supermarket. I will pay much more attention and try to open my eyes, or pray that my eyes be open to see what is the unseen around me. Thank you for your amazing work at the Migrant Farmworkers Assistance Fund. You all do amazing work. And thank you for those of you who have listened in. Let's open our eyes. Let's pay attention. Let's find a way forward together. And now we're going to conclude with a little bit of thank yous that we come from this same little video that we put together. So let's have the thank you note and let that be the final word. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
O sea, me siento bien, pero pues me siento tan a gusto bien y vengo también aquí porque
I feel good. I feel happy because of your support. Because when I come here, I go see you and I am thankful. I rely on your help. I trust you, and I know I have your help.
Amen. How perfect. How perfect. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Sister Simone.
Thanks very much.